All right. Cheers and salutations. Welcome to Americans Learn. My name is Kit. Please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and hit that ring bell notification. That way, all you lovely, beautiful people are made aware when we upload new content. You guessed it, upon our YouTube channel. And today, we have ourselves a fun video to check out. It is titled Battlefield Secrets: How Did the Romans Clean Up After the Battles by Historia Militum. So, folks, listen, please do me a favor, you beautiful, hip, cool cats. Please do the right thing and support the original content creator. It's the right thing to do. It's the one thing to do, and I expect all you beautiful, lovely people to do it. So, without further ado, since I'm in charge of the ones and twos, let's get ready to play this video in a 3, a 2, and an uno and out. Let's play it. Let's find out how they cleaned up, because that was probably a bloody mess.
As the dust of a battlefield settles, the cacophony of thousands of men marching and weapons clashing are replaced by an eerie silence.
Ugh.
Crows and vultures feast on the thousands of corpses that litter the now silent battlefield. A silence only interrupted by the occasional cries of wounded men and animals. Scattered next to the bodies are pieces of armor, shields, standards, swords, and other equipment. As darkness falls, a series of shadows in military gear start to roam the battlefield. But these are not looters or returning survivors. They are several specially sent out work parties, each undertaking a different task. Speaking of looters, today's video sponsor Incogni has a solution to the growing problem of modern internet thieves. Every year, the number and scope of data breaches worldwide are rising, and with it, the risk of your own data getting breached.
Protect yourselves out there at all time, lovely, beautiful people. The internet can be a great place, but a bad place, too.
Already, there may be hundreds of commercial databases and people search sites that hold your personal information. These data brokers then sell or publish your personal information, including names, social security numbers, home addresses, and more, exposing you to a wide range of dangers from scams to identity theft. What Incogni does is keeps you safe by reaching out to data brokers on your behalf and conducting repeated requests for your personal data to be removed. So whenever a new record pops up on a data broker site, Incogni will automatically take care of it, handling any objections from data brokers and keeping you updated on the process. Their yearly subscription is especially advantageous, giving you a full protection for as long as you use the service. And they have given our dear viewers a 60% discount with our code MILITUM. Click the link in the description to take full advantage of their offer. Claiming victory is one thing, but the aftermath of a battle is not limited to just storming the enemy's camp and claiming the spoils. Far from it. There is a lot more to be done after the end of a battle. Groups of idle soldiers are sent out as soon as possible to look for wounded comrades. For some, every minute could mean the difference between life and death, and they first need to be found among the myriad of bodies. Every wounded soldier that can make a full recovery is one soldier less that has to be recruited and trained for months, and also allows the army to retain its experience. The wounded who can walk or have minor injuries are either treated on the spot by the army's medical staff or loaded onto stretchers or wagons and taken to the hospital, where the medici will do their best. Those with lethal injuries or signs of infections will at least be taken care of as best as possible for the time period. This process can last for several days, and the wounded might need weeks or even months before they are able to join the army again. Centurions and officers will also have to report the number of casualties and the identities of those fallen in combat during their respective headcounts. While part of the army is busy treating the wounded, others are put in charge of collecting the dead. An extremely important matter, as the
Bring out the dead! Bring out the dead!
Historian Onosander explains. The general should take thought for the burial of the dead, whether in victory or defeat, using neither the occasion nor the time nor the place as an excuse for delay. This is an act of both piety and reverence towards the dead, and also a necessary example to the living. For if the dead are not buried, each soldier believes that no care will be taken of his own body should he have the chance to fall. The soldier observes what happens to the dead with his own eyes, and indignant at the careless neglect of burial, judges the future, believing that if he should die, he will likewise not be buried. Leaving the bodies of the dead without a proper burial or funerary ceremony is something the Romans frowned upon, and wise generals always took care of treating the dead with a modicum of respect. In times of peace, every soldier would get a proper burial, but the Romans knew very well the medical risks of being exposed to rotting corpses for long periods of time. Therefore, in such situations, more expeditive methods were tolerated, and the dead from the rank and file were buried in mass unmarked graves or cremated in large pyres. Roman soldiers
See, now, I think the cremation would have been a far more effective, but all right, interesting.
had a voluntary system of paying a portion of their salary towards a tombstone in the event of their death. For those who paid, their surviving comrades back in the fort would make sure to host them a proper ceremony and a tombstone, even if no remains are present. Thousands of these have survived the ages and are being found continually to this day, detailing not
True Roman heroes who deserve a true Roman salute.
only the names and careers of soldiers, but also sometimes their families and status. It is always very intriguing to read them and imagine the unique people they once belonged to. This one, for example, was from Castra Vetera and belonged to a 53-year-old centurion named Marcus Caelius of
53?
the 18th Legion
Wow.
who died fighting at the Teutoburg Forest.
Oh no.
Caelius's relatives could rest assured that he received a proper burial when Germanicus visited the battlefield years later and took great pains in burying all the dead. Of course, all of this was not the case for Roman generals or higher-ranking officers. Like everything in the Roman period, rank came with special privileges, and the same went for burials. In the case of generals and high-ranking officers, a proper funeral would be held right after the battle, with the whole army taking part, as dictated by Roman tradition. This honor sometimes extended to heroes of the battle. Appian makes note of an honorary burial done for Centurion Gaius Crastinus, who led the charge of the entire Caesarian army at Pharsalus. When sought for, he was found among the dead, and Caesar bestowed military honors on his body and buried it, and erected a special tomb for him near the common burial place of the others. Only on very rare occasions would the Romans build a war memorial to remember the fallen, like the one Trajan built at Adamclisi. Impressively, all 4,000 individual names of the deceased were carved into it, and special ceremonies would be carried out on certain dates. It would
Oh wow, I didn't know they did all this.
read in honor and memory of the staff.
I'm sorry, I'm speechless here. Look, like normally, guys, I like to do some jokes and laugh around and have my little Roman Satorian here, but no, this is serious. This is awesome. I want to see more stuff from this channel.
Proudest men who fell fighting and died for the Republic.
Fighting
But
against
what
foul
about the
barbarians.
countless wounded on the enemy side? Sometimes even they would be taken care of
They're barbarians. Kill them.
by the Romans, depending on their level of civilization and nature of their injuries, but only to be taken prisoner or enslaved, as the slave markets paid very well for healthy
I mean, oh no, how bad? Lousy Germanic bastards.
captives. Those whose injuries were too severe were finished off on the spot. A similar fate would await the bodies of the less civilized enemies of Rome, who would be left to rot. But a very different treatment would be offered to those belonging to the enemy nobility. After all, they can be very lucrative assets to be ransomed or used as political bargaining chips. During the later stages of the Second Punic War, Scipio Africanus freed Massinisa's nephew, Massiva, who had been captured in Hispania. He,
They should have executed him. Never mind.
of course, did this as a gesture of good faith to win over the Numidian prince to the Roman cause. In the case of other captives, they would also be used in prisoner swaps. Especially shameful for the Romans was the episode after the disastrous Battle of Cannae, when the Senate flat out refused to pay the ransom for the soldiers who had surrendered to Hannibal. In other cases, we note that the Romans took great care in tracking Roman citizens who had been sold into slavery by the enemy and demanding their release and repatriation as a peace condition. Unfortunately, the same did not happen to many of Rome's enemies, who would be mercilessly sold into slavery or paraded as war trophies.
They should not have stood against the might of Rome.
With the dead and wounded being taken care of by the soldiers and medics, the legion's smiths and artisans also had their share of work to do, and it wasn't smaller in size. First and foremost, broken equipment needed to be repaired and brought into service as soon as possible, so it is not uncommon to find small bands of soldiers scavenging for broken gear or stripping fallen comrades for their weapons and armor. In fact, even the enemy gear was often collected and stored as trophies for public display, or for emergencies. Livy tells us that after the Battle of Cannae, Rome needed such vast quantities of equipment for its legions that even enemy weapons that were displayed as trophies in temples or in storage were used to equip the men. The appearance of that Roman army would surely have been very unique. One thing for sure, the entire battlefield in a matter of days would be stripped clean of every bit of equipment worth collecting. Only arrowheads, artillery missiles, sling bullets, and smaller objects are often discarded because many were too damaged or very hard to find. So it's unsurprising why these represent the most common findings among excavated battlefield sites, and why a complete sword or helmet in good condition is extremely rare, as they would have had to stay hidden not just from the army, but from centuries of grave robbers and looters.
Right.
The collection of the spoils of war in the form of important and valuable objects was another key post-battle activity. This, however, was supervised by members of the general's staff, who counted up the loot and made sure nothing was appropriated by the soldiers, because unless explicitly stated, soldiers had no right to battlefield loot, as it all lawfully belonged to their general, acting as a representative of the state. So soldiers had to give up everything and wait for it all to be gathered, processed, and evenly distributed among them, normally in the form of cash. We have records of large amounts being given to soldiers after the end of the campaign. But this didn't mean that soldiers and camp followers didn't try to lurk in the shadows and pocket valuable items. Nothing prevented a soldier from looting an enemy corpse or tent while no officers were around. And things like footwear, cloaks, weapons, small jewelry, or even everyday items like cups were very prized among soldiers. Not only are they carryable and easy to hide, but they can fetch a good price in markets. Winning a lottery for a soldier would mean getting his hands on a luxurious saddle or a piece of furniture from an enemy officer's tent, which could easily be equivalent to a few months' salary. The only problem would be carrying it home without being caught and punished. So it's safe to assume that soldiers would always leave the most bulky and burdensome loot to the general and focus on pocketing smaller items.
You gotta think light, smooth, and fast. Don't get the big shiny stuff, get the little shiny stuff, because it all adds up.
Polybius comments on the actions of Roman soldiers after their victory at Cynocephaly. The Romans, after following up the fugitives for a certain distance, began, some of them, to strip the dead and others to collect prisoners. But most of them ran to plunder the enemy's camp. Finding, however, that the Aetolians had anticipated them there, and considering themselves defrauded of the booty that was rightfully theirs, they began to find fault with the Aetolians, and told their general that he imposed the risk on them and gave up the booty to others. For the present, they returned to their own camp and retired to rest, and spent the next day collecting prisoners and what was left of the spoil. This quote gives us an idea of the tension that would sometimes arise when soldiers were denied their loot, which would result in less bonuses for them. On special occasions, the general could reward his men with all the battlefield loot and give them complete free rein. This was very good for keeping the men happy, but wasn't customary.
No.
Firstly, because the general was obliged to collect the loot and send part of it back to Rome, and secondly, because it could raise even more tensions and complaints between soldiers about the unfair distribution of loot. In this case, the first ones to break rank after battle and start looting would often collect the best loot, while those who were on patrol, burying the dead, or healing the wounded would get second-hand picks.
Yeah, don't be doing that.
This could very easily diminish camaraderie and trigger fights not only between the soldiers but also with any officers who got in the way. What's most interesting though is where was the limit after which the famous Roman discipline collapsed, and mutinous soldiers attacked their officers and
No, show me. Not mutinous soldiers. They're all loyal to Rome.
did as they pleased, and how would their generals ever be expected to deal with them? All these answers have already been compiled for you in our video about Roman mutinies, so make sure to check it out. Thank you to all our Patreons for making this video possible. Please consider joining them if you wish to support us and participate in polls where we decide.
Okay. I like this channel. I want to see more of it. History, Militum. Only 1.6 million views. It should be at 100 million views. So every true Roman, please support the original content creator. Please be sure to subscribe and follow their content on all their social medias. It's the right thing to do. It's a one thing to do. I expect all of you to do it, but Again, the fact that there were so many. There's one tomb to the 4,000 soldiers there. There was a process. There's a detail. It's been like that, but I never took into consideration the idea of how the Romans would clean up after a battle. Hell, dare I say it, how any of the ancient armies, even before Rome, I can't believe I even uttered those words, and even during the Dark Ages, how battlefields were cleaned up. But that was a fascinating video, and I want to see more of it. So if you guys and gals want to see more of Historiam Militum, please type in the comment section below. I have to see more of this, but I loved it. And this was great. And any content about ancient Rome, you already know I'm going to give an unbiased perspective because Rome can never do any wrong. And the fact that, Roman mutinies, for shame on me for even saying that, Roman mutinies. That will never, ever happen.